Right. Hello. Good evening. Good evening and welcome to Stowe Talks. Now, tonight's session is about how to financially prepare for divorce. Okay, so this means we're going to be talking about money. I suppose it's a bit money and well-being, and it's money and well-being at what is perhaps the most difficult time in someone's life, really. We know that money is one of the most frightening aspects of a relationship breakdown. Money impacts everything. And to be clear, tonight, we're not going to be talking about financial settlements specifically tonight in terms of an order for sale for the family home or spousal maintenance, but instead we're going to be talking about the practical steps that someone can take when faced with sorting out finances upon divorce. Okay. Now, family breakdown, as we know, it's difficult to navigate, and frequently people can feel paralyzed. They can feel helpless when it comes to sorting out the financial side of things. There's a load of reasons for that, but ultimately, everyday life doesn't stop. You still have to go to work. You still have to be a parent. Frequently, people don't feel like they have any space left, to breathe, let alone have the capacity to deal with the finances. And this is also particularly true if finances have been a difficult topic in the marriage, or if there is domestic abuse, obviously. Okay, so frequently it can be an overwhelming task and a daunting task that sometimes people might want to leave until later. As a lawyer, I frequently warn against this. In some instances, leaving finances until later causes risk. The money that was there once might not be there anymore later on, and you will incur legal costs trying to recover it. Sometimes you may even inadvertently be doing yourself a disservice by trying to become independent sooner than you actually need to. You may inadvertently end up setting your housing needs at a lower level than what a fair outcome regarding finances would actually be. So there's lots of different reasons to get on with it. Frequently, people need financial support to move on. Now, tonight, hopefully, as I say, we're going to be giving some clarity on what to focus on when you're embarking on this journey. Our guest tonight is Jodie Phelps. Now, Jodie is a financial planner who helps people organise their money. She's on our radar in particular because she's passionate about educating people about money and also how to manage feelings around money. Okay, now Jodie's a people person. She's a great communicator, and I think that makes a big difference when we're talking about money and divorce. She makes something that is very daunting. She makes that subject very accessible to everybody. So tonight we're going to cover quite a few things, but principally, what are the main financial challenges people face when going into divorce? What does financially prepared actually mean? How to understand your finances, but also we're going to be looking at top tips to getting into a stronger financial position if that's possible. Of course, we know that it is a very difficult situation to be in, and frequently the breakdown of a marriage means that we're making two households out of what was one household. So things are a stretch. It's normal to feel overwhelmed. And as I say, hopefully tonight we can give you some practical tips. And our goal is to help you perhaps feel more in control when you're starting out with this journey, ultimately. Okay, so tonight's format is going to be Jodie's presentation, and then we're going to do questions. So we do a Q&A session at the end. Of which is pretty interactive. So firstly, some housekeeping. To be clear, we're not giving any financial advice, obviously. These are tips regarding managing your own finances or how to approach your finances when you're about to start the divorce. You should always seek independent advice about your specific circumstances. Big welcome to new listeners, and welcome back to old friends as usual. You don't have to be going through this to visit us and spend time with us at Stowe Talks. You can be a student, you can be a family member, you can be a counsellor or even a lawyer, just looking to meet new people in terms of experts, etc. We welcome you. in whatever capacity you're here in with us tonight, which is great to have you. We're going to be recording tonight's session. As you know, you'll have had the warning when you logged on. For questions, obviously, please use the Q&A section at the top, the Q&A function on Zoom. We've enabled the chat function, so please feel free to make comments and chat. Be respectful, obviously. I know you always are, but I do like to mention that it is a safe space, obviously, for people to pass comment in the chat box up there. Now, and also, please give us feedback. Our webinars are driven by what you would like to know about and what you would like to hear about. So let us know what you think and what you'd like to hear about next. Jodie's been with us a few times now. As I say, she's a great communicator and she's an absolute delight to have on these podcasts and webinars that we do. The next Stowe Talks is going to be, where are we? I think we're at the end of August, aren't we? About the importance of emotional support through divorce. I think that might be the 25th of August, but I'm sure Kate's going to set me straight in a minute. And obviously the information for that will come out shortly. So, right, without further ado, Jodie, over to you. I think you're in charge of the script.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So yeah, just a little bit about me before we begin. Sarah's touched on a bit of it there already, but yeah, 14 years of experience working in finance. I do help individuals, families, businesses achieve their goals. I have one of my specialist areas are divorcing clients. So it's an area I help people with a lot. Personally, I've been through divorce myself, which helps because I've been there and understand the process. And as Sarah touched on, I am very passionate about financial wellbeing and do try to make things as simple as I can. You know, finance can be such a, so many different strange words and jargon, and it's quite nice to be able to keep it basic so everyone can understand it. So as what we're going to look at today, so the importance of financial independence, main financial challenges, how to understand your assets and position, and then some top tips. So as Sarah said, to get advice, I'd need to know your whole situation. So these are kind of generic top tips today, but they should be helpful to everybody. And what I would say as well is a lot of the time people tend to wait until there's a trigger to look at their finances. So whether it's divorce or separation, or if it's often I come across people who have sadly lost their partner as well. And I'd say these same tips would apply because really you don't look at your finances until something bad happens. But if you can be financially prepared and have your finances in good order, then as we all know, life throws things at us we're not expecting. And it just means that side of things is, you know, you're already ahead of the game. Rather than a lot of people wait till something happens, then suddenly they've got to look at everything from top to bottom. So even if you don't go through separation or divorce or what have you, I'd say if you follow these kind of top tips, then you'll be in a stronger position for anything that could be thrown your way. So so what are the main financial challenges we face when we go into divorce? So a lot of the time what I see is lack of awareness and control over current expenses. A lot of people, I think we're all guilty of it, really have unhealthy spending habits. So it could be emotional spending. So when you're feeling a bit down, you buy yourself something nice. It could be that you just, unorganized and order from Uber Eats 5 times a week. But yeah, I've seen lots of this, but it's just being aware of the habits that you have. So the best thing here is obviously looking through your old statements and figuring out what they are, but also unnecessary subscriptions. So a lot of people tend to be paying for things that they don't even realize they're paying for until they start going through their statements and they're like, oh, I don't use that anymore, or what's this one for, or paying for something twice. And also unreviewed household bills. So a lot of people just leave them to kind of roll over without comparing and seeing if there's a better deal out there. So also familiarity with savings and investments. So as Sarah touched on as well, a lot of the times I'm in a relationship, there'll be one person who takes control of the finances, and be it because it's purely out of control and not for very nice reasons, but also a lot of the time I see it just because one person likes to do that and the other one doesn't. But I think it's really important to not kind of bury your head under the sand, and just because you're not the one who deals with it, it's good to still be aware. But I see a lot of the time here, so not understanding the significance of savings, investments, and what they mean, what they do. So yeah. Complexity of pensions. So one of the most complex things to divide is pensions, and also there's lots of different types of pensions. So they can be really challenging to comprehend the long-term value of those as well. So they're always a big topic when divorce comes up. But yeah, a lot of people don't understand the complexity of pensions. Businesses. So this is always a big one. So a lot of the time, especially if it's one person's main business, the other person doesn't really understand the value of the business, or the financial side of the business at all, really. So if you can kind of pay attention to that, that's good. Also, divorce proceedings could impact business stability and profitability, and then also risk of disclosing sensitive information that a partner could know about the business, and obviously the tax side of things can be complex. Okay, so selling assets. So a lot of the time, for example, for a buy-to-let property, or if there's shares involved, then this could have a tax implication there. So it's often quite not that clear cut, the value of assets that are held. Also division of joint debt. So this is a quite interesting one, really, because a lot of the times I've seen when suddenly people separate and they may have joint loans or joint mortgages, and the danger here is if you both suddenly say, oh, I'm not paying that mortgage or loan. First of all, if you're not paying a credit card, missing bills and loan payments, that can really affect your credit score. And then later, when you do come to actually, divorcing and having to buy your own house, this can really affect, you being able to have a mortgage. So it's tried to be long-sighted with every decision, but so not taking care of these, as I said here, can negatively impact your credit score. But also when you're dividing the joint debts, it is often that one person will have a lot bigger income than the other. So the lending capacity can be very different. And this is something, we see a lot in divorce, actually. One person may not be able to borrow enough to have the house that they want. Okay, so changes to income. So going from two incomes to one income is always a big, something very big to deal with and get your head around. And often it's going to be a change of lifestyle for both of you, really. Spousal and child support. So one party may be required to make regular payments. So this is just something to be aware of and can be a challenge. Okay, so reviewing protection setup. So this is something that's kind of missed off for a lot of people. So things like mortgage protection or life insurance, critical illness protection, these would all have been set up based on your situation at the time. So it would have been based on you being married and the policy paying out to your spouse. So a lot of the time I do see people who have got, still paying for these protection policies, well, actually, they're not really the best policies for them anymore. Also, so it's the emotional and psychological cost. So the cost on your mental health should be factored in. A lot of clients I see, they have to go through some kind of, divorce coaching, counselling, because it's been quite an emotional situation. On top of that, it could mean that you need time off work as well. So this again can impact you financially. Okay, so I'm going to try now to go into kind of tips on how to deal with these things. So first of all, how to understand your assets and your position. So if you're looking at your money as a whole, how to understand where you are at the moment before you can then look to kind of move forward. So first thing I would say to do would be to gather all your financial documents. This can be quite a tedious task, and it's one that I personally don't really like doing either, but it's, you know, it's maybe calling up your mortgage provider and asking for a recent statement, calling up your bank, and, you know, if you don't have that access to them online accounts, making sure you get that access, gather the bank statements from there, look at your tax returns, any credit agreements, if you've got like a SOFA on finance, or insurance policies, business statements. So gather all the information you can about what you know is in place. So then list your assets and your liabilities. So if from there you kind of then make a list of actually, you know, what's your property worth, the value of that if you know it, vehicles, any value on them, what savings you have, investments, pensions, any items of value, so it might be some fine art or jewelry, and any businesses as well. And then from there, it's making a list of your liabilities. So what debts have you got? You know, what's the outstanding balance on your mortgage? And where your mortgage comes in as well, it's really a good idea to have a look at how long are you fixed in for? So what's the period of time that you're in that fixed rate for? What rate are you paying? And looking at loans as well. So the outstanding amount, but the term on those. Credit cards, what interest are you paying? Is it worth switching it over to an interest-free credit card? And then any other debts as well. So from there, once you've kind of totaled up your assets, so you know your overall kind of, all your assets added together, add up all your liabilities, and then you take one from the other, and then that gives you your kind of net worth figure. And it's quite just good practice to understand what that is, if you are about to embark onto a divorce or separation. Also create a budget planner. So list all your income. So this may be from your job. It could be any benefits that you may get. It might be from, you know, investments or savings. So make a list of all your income there, expenses, and your disposable income. So you get a real good idea of what's kind of left every month. Okay, so finally, I'm just going to share some kind of top 10 tips on how to be financially prepared for divorce. Okay, so we've touched on this one already. So understand your current assets. So know your joint and sole income. So I did say then understanding the income that comes to you, but you know, when you're in a marriage, it's good to understand the income, if you can, of your partner as well, and what, you know, if you can look at your account and get an idea of what money they're earning as well, and what other incomes there are. Manage your outgoings. So look at your joint account, your sole account, and see what outgoings there are. Understanding your joint and sole liabilities. So if there are any credit or debts that you've set up in, you know, whilst you've been together, even if they're not in your name, you know, what are they? Again, what amounts are outstanding, and what are the terms of those? So it's really important to have your own bank account. I have seen a lot people who've only got joint accounts, and whilst they're going through separation, obviously the other partner has the ability to take all the money out or spend all the money, or restrict what you've got in there. So I would say it'd be a really good idea to have your own personal bank account, so you have got that bit of independence. Also with that, build an emergency fund. So if you can, start saving a little bit, putting a little bit aside. So, you know, for any expenses that may kind of be occurred throughout the divorce. Just trying to look after yourself, really. Improve your credit score. So it's quite likely that you may need to get a mortgage in your own name, or other lending as a result of the divorce. So things like ensuring you're on the voters roll where you live. If you've never had any credit before, just having a small credit card that you pay off every month to kind of show that you're capable of borrowing money responsibly. But yeah, there are a few different things you can do to improve your credit score, so you're in a position to be able to borrow money if you need to. But always say check your beneficiary designation. So what this means is, say, for example, you've got a workplace pension. You would have logged on there who you want that money to go to if anything happens to you. So a lot of times when people have kind of going through or gone through divorce, they won't necessarily have thought about updating these. So any pensions you've got there, or life insurance policies, just updating them so that it expresses your wishes of who you want this money to go to. And then develop a financial plan. So as we touched on earlier, note down your income, your outgoings, figure out what you've got spare, and then, you know, make a plan to start putting a little bit of money away for an emergency fund, pay off any debts that you know that are really costly and they may not be prioritized during the divorce period, which can take a long time. So yeah, try to develop a plan to get yourself into a good financial position. And then finally, consult a financial advisor. So as I've said, these are all very kind of generic tips really, but everybody's different. Everybody has different situations, emotionally, but also financially. So actually speaking through your situation yourself, with an expert, and understanding, you know, what's the best thing for you to do, is really important. And I'd say it's good to have an advisor there as part of your power team, as, you know, aside your solicitor and any close friends, when you're about to embark on that journey. But yeah, thank you. I'll just go to the next slide and then we can start questions. I'm not sure how to see the questions, sorry.
Don't panic, I'm just going to marshal them. I've got one here. I'm kind of jiggling a little bit as to what we do first, because I think this one kind of ties quite nicely into what we've just been talking about in terms of getting organised and budgets in particular. The reason we talk about outgoings and budgets, it is a really important part of the English law in this area about, sorry, the law in England and Wales in this area about making sure that both parties can move in their separate directions, as unencumbered as possible following the end of the marriage. And I've got a question here. It says, I've separated from my partner and he is the main earner and refusing to help me financially. Can I get any maintenance before our finances are settled? So it's this interim period. Your marriage is broken down. You're looking at your finances. You've got to make two households out of one household. It's you know, what are you entitled to? It's a bit of a tricky one, this, and you can guarantee the minute you tell somebody you're separating and divorcing, people around you will tell you their divorce and separation story, whether you want to hear it or not, which is why doing these sessions is so important, and hearing from you, Jodie, is so important as well. So financial support before the finances are settled. Ultimately, yes, there is the provision that you can get financial support from your ex before the finances are settled, but inevitably there will be doing something about the finances in order to get that financial support, because what we need to ascertain is what the shortfall is in terms of your outgoings. Okay. Spousal maintenance, or rather interim maintenance, or maintenance pending suit, which is sometimes as it's called, is going to be calculated on the basis of that shortfall, but in light of what your outgoings are, what your income is, but also the outgoings and the income of the other person. Spousal maintenance or interim financial support can only be ordered if there is the resources there to pay it, and it may be time limited. It is there as it may just top up your own income, but that circle, as I'm circling back really, Jodie, to what you've been talking about in terms of budgets, being aware of your own spending is so important in these situations. Jodie, do you have people coming to you to get you to help them with their budgets? Am I right?
Oh yeah, all the time. So, and that's why, you know, if you can get ahead of that before you go into divorce, you're a step ahead of the game. But it's quite daunting, and you know, people often don't know where to start. But I think literally going through and especially if your income is, you know, isn't the same every month, it's quite hard to know. But if you go through your statements, you know, the last few months, and literally, so I normally have a list of your general kind of essential spending, like your food, your petrol, your tax, your insurances. So when you've got that list there, and then you can kind of go through and actually individually note them down. It can be a bit of a task, but once it's done, I think you just feel good after. It's like one of those things you can kind of tick off and think, right, I know exactly what my expenses are right now, but also you know what they might be when you do separate, and which they will be different, but it just makes everything a bit more clearer, which always makes you feel better.
Yeah, and you do feel in control when you've done it, and you are able to explain how you got to those numbers. I appreciate that it's very easy for me to sit here and say, just do your budget. I know how hard it is to do. Frequently, I'll give people a budget spreadsheet to complete, and I'll say, have a go, leave it for a couple of days, go back to it, leave it for another couple of days, because there's things we forget, just like you were pointing out earlier in the presentation. We forget about the insurances, we forget about those charity donations we signed up to 5 years ago, we forget about those magazine subscriptions. Doesn't mean that everything has to be cold necessarily, but let's look at that spending to start with. As the majority of people know, maintenance for a spouse, whether it's spousal maintenance, interim maintenance, is a bit of a hot potato. It's the last thing you really want to be arguing about in court too much on an interim basis before you get to your final order, because you can get some very unpredictable results. But ultimately, let's get organised. Let's work out what your outgoings actually are. Work out what your income's going to be, and just like you said, make sure you're getting appraised of what you're actually entitled to. Universal credits, that sort of thing. Child maintenance, make sure you're getting the right amount of child maintenance, or that you're paying the right amount of child maintenance. Just because someone tells you what the figure is, please always go and check it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I just read one here, and it's to someone who's renting. So I'd say obviously there's bits in the presentation that aren't going to be applicable to everybody, but same applies really, where, you know, if you are renting, yeah, I've got clients who don't own houses, and it's just knowing actually what your rental property is at the moment. So rather than the mortgage, you know, what you're paying in rent, and perhaps having a little look at actually what your needs are, you know, if you did separate, what your needs are and what the rental need could be going forward. But yeah, understanding that as an outgoing, whether it's a mortgage payment or a rental payment, it's the same applies really.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And if you've got a joint tenancy, by the way, for a rental property, always remember to get your name off it if you're moving out. Don't leave your name attached to a joint tenancy, because that can leave you in a bit of a pickle later on if rent's not paid. And don't forget that deposit you probably both paid at the beginning when you moved in. Okay. Got a nice little question here. It says, my partner has left a lot of debt. My partner has a lot of debt in his name. It's his name only. And I want to separate. Will I be liable for that debt if we divorce? Okay. Again, I'm going to give you a slightly lawyerish answer here in terms of it depends what the debt is and how it's been accrued. If it's debt because he has a hobby, which is solely his passion, his thing, perhaps, or it's debt because he's departed the relationship, or there's alcohol dependency or substance abuse or something like that on his side, perhaps. It's different from debt that's been incurred for the benefit of the family. So we talk about matrimonial debt. We talk about matrimonial debt, which would be, for example, buying a new washing machine when something breaks down, going on the family holiday. There is a difference between what is matrimonial debt and should be borne by both parties, or what is debt that's been incurred for just the benefit of one person. Ultimately, these things do turn on what income there is in the marriage to discharge those debts, ultimately. And we need to look at how those debts, what type of debts they are, how severe are they in terms of, is this a situation where monthly payments can be made if one person takes responsibility for those debts post-divorce, or is it something that's really pressing now? So you mentioned obviously about the mortgage capacities and people's ability to borrow. Sometimes debt can obviously impact on that and things like that. If we've got savings elsewhere, should we just get rid of that debt? So it is a bit of a case-by-case basis, obviously, but just because it's in one person's name doesn't mean categorically that it is for that person to discharge, because it could have been incurred for the benefit of the family. Okay, right. Jodie, have you seen anything that you want to pick out that you want to answer?
Yeah, one that I'll touch on. I know you'll probably know the legal answer to it, but from the finance side of it. So building up emergency fund, could that then be seen as part of the the marriage assets. I mean, I'm guessing it will, which I'm sure, Sarah, you'll agree with. But the main reason I say that is I've worked with some clients who, on divorce, they'll suddenly, if they don't have their own accounts and any money in their own name, it's a real struggle, because whilst the divorce is being settled, there's no money to dip into. So even if it is going to be seen as the, you know, part of the marital assets to be split, it's just making sure you've got some money available to you, because especially if you're not, you know, you don't earn any money, you haven't got any income coming in, divorces can get nasty, and it might be that other person suddenly won't give you any money. And you know, things can take time to sort out. So having a bit of money in your own name or an account in your own name, it just means that you've got a bit of independence there throughout the process. But yeah, I don't know, Sarah, if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, you're spot on. It has to be disclosed, and it can be subject to being divided. So be proportionate in terms of what you stash away. The majority of us generally, in a situation where you're making two households out of one household, you know, not many people are always in a position to stash money to one side for legal fees. If you can, that's absolutely brilliant. You know, when we're looking at a court fee for a no-fault divorce at being nearly £600 anyway, this isn't a cheap exercise. You know, even if you go to mediation, the mediator still needs to be paid. You know, you might be looking at a pension report, which could be £1,000 to £2,000 plus VAT. Yes, the report cost is divided between the two of you and shared. Or any valuation reports, likewise, you know, would be shared between you both. But those kind of costs, it's handy to have some money for those to one side. Absolutely. I generally speaking, this isn't a legal point, but if you know you need a fund for legal fees, you probably know that before the marriage has come to an end. I've got a couple of friends who refer to their running away funds, you know, in jest, but you know, it's not unusual for people to have a bit of a few savings tucked away, obviously for the expenses that are involved in either leaving a marriage because you need to set up a home elsewhere, or engaging lawyers, for example. So, but yes, you have to disclose, and you'll get into lots of trouble for not disclosing, obviously. So please be good, everybody. Right, let's pick another question, shall we? Just as we're talking about funding cases and emergency funds, perhaps, there was a question about litigation loans. So funding a case is difficult, and it's an overwhelming thing to do. Legal aid, as we know, is barely available for very many people. If you think you might be on the cusp of being eligible, always check it out with a legal aid lawyer. Loads of firms, they do an analysis with you to check whether or not you would be eligible. So if you think you might be borderline, get in contact with a legal aid firm and get them to double check for you. Litigation loans, people frequently will revert to them. They are with specific lenders who lend obviously for the litigation. There are lots of different providers. Give it a Google, and I can't talk through them in too much detail on here, I'm afraid. Check out the terms, but also check out what else is available to you. Check out personal loans. Check out, 0% credit card. I think your decision making for funding your legal costs is frequently coupled with how long you think you're going to need to be borrowing for, how much you think you're going to need, and if you're using a lawyer, you need to pin them down, obviously, and good lawyers will sit down with you and say, this is exactly what we think you could be at risk of if things don't go well, or if they do go well. Law firms issue you with cost estimates. You should have a very good opinion you should be appraised very much so of what the costs are going to be. I appreciate at the beginning of a case, when you're just starting out, it's hard to know whether or not things are going to go south, I suppose, and you're going to be faced with a big legal bill. You will know as you start the process as to whether that's probably going to be a likelihood. You probably know by virtue of the fact that you know that person best because you were married to them anyway, so you may well have an inkling that sorting out money might not be that easy. Right. We have a question here. My ex-husband keeps messing with our agreed interim payment. Is there anything I can do? I'd love to know whether or not that interim payment is in a court order. I'm assuming not. If it is in a court order, then we would obviously enforce. Is there anything to do with the interim payment? It will depend, I suppose. It's a bit of a proportionality exercise, because you can go all guns blazing to get it sorted out now. But if you're on the cusp of getting the whole financial settlement done, then and you're needing to keep the peace to achieve a bigger objective as peacefully and as cost effectively as possible, that's always an interesting one to kind of sit and think about. But ultimately, you're being paid financial support on an interim basis because you need it, ultimately. So we need to get that paid. Feel free to get in contact and we can talk through a few more options about that one. Where are we? Let's have a look. Jodie, can you see any questions in the chat that you'd like to answer? I'm just working on. I've had one about pensions. I'm in the early stages of divorce and my partner has a much bigger pension than me. Is this included in the financial settlement? Yes, you're going to be disclosing everything you both have. In the law in this area in England and Wales, we do have a principle of full disclosure in terms of you're going to be entering into a financial settlement to bring your financial claims on each other to an end on a level playing field. That's in the full knowledge of each other's financial circumstances. Some couples choose not to do the financial disclosure, and some people do financial disclosure but aren't truthful. It's a bit of a tricky one, obviously. But pensions, yes, you have to disclose them. Whether or not the pension is shared with you will depend on a variety of factors, including how long the marriage is, what your own pension assets are, where you are in life. If you're in your 20s and it's a flash in the pan kind of marriage of 18 months and you barely have any pensions between you, then of course we're not looking at a pension share. But if you're in your early 60s and what you have at that stage is what you're going to have, and one party has a much bigger pension resource than the other, then of course we're going to be looking at a pension share to make sure that needs are met and that a fair outcome can be achieved, if that helps. Okay. Right. Oh, and there's a dog. There's always a dog. Oh, crikey. Right, dog. We also we have a dog for 5. We've had a dog for 5 years, and my soon-to-be ex is saying that now either you have to have a sole responsibility or he does. He doesn't want to share anymore. Well, I can understand. You know, it's difficult to share anything. Kids, you have to. Dogs and pets, if you can't agree how this is going to go in terms of arrangements between you both, then, and it comes before a district judge, then the district judge's view is that they will sell the pet. So hopefully that kind of clarifies the position there and clarifies both your minds. Sorry, it's a really difficult one. As a dog owner and lover myself, I worry about that one all the time. But yes, have the dog. Good. Yes, keep the dog. I kept the dog and he's awesome. So there you go. Right. Jodie,
yeah, this is one here about any practical advice for situations where one party believes the other's not disclosing or undervaluing assets. I mean, that's one for you to answer, Sarah, but I thought it was quite a good question.
Sorry, what was that? What to do if people
if you believe that you're, I think I'm limited to what I can see, by the way, so there's only a few on mine, but yeah, I can see one there about if you believe that one person's undervaluing assets.
Right. Okay. And that's a very common scenario to be in. Especially people are inclined to undervalue assets if they are looking to retain that asset. It's frequently an argument over something like a family home. You know, people can come to the table with very different views on what their property is worth, depending on whether they want it sold or whether they want to keep it. that sort of issue, a family home or property, is relatively easily resolved. We can do expert reports. A chartered surveyor would normally be instructed to prepare an expert report for the court, frequently called a single joint expert report. You both agree the identity of the surveyor, you agree what the surveyor is going to be reporting on, you agree to share the cost, and you agree to abide by the results of what the chartered surveyor kind of comes to the table with. There is a cost obviously with that. An alternative is that you approach 3 different estate agents and get market appraisals. If the property is going to be sold, then obviously putting it on the market to start with an estate agent that you both agreed kind of gets rid of that sort of situation with the property. Property, as I say, is quite easily resolvable. The problem with assets being undervalued when it comes to a business is a bit more of a bigger deal. Sometimes in a business, the one party, it's their business. They've got an interest in the business. They run it. They are responsible for it. Sometimes if they are the only person running that business, there is the opportunity to make them look poorer than they actually are. There is always that opportunity. If you're co-directors, there's a little bit less opportunity, but you need to look at, take some advice. There are different types of businesses. If, for example, you're in manufacturing, you're making things or selling things, you're going to have a stock value. If you are, for example, a financial advisor, for example, you, Jodie, your advice and you are your business. So doing the business, if we took you out of it, there's nothing, if that makes sense, or very little compared to what it would be if we were selling a business that's a shop and a premises, or that sort of thing. I think
you can get specialists, can't you, who go in and value the businesses as well, like rather than just the business assets, they can go in and actually put a value. I think you have them at Stowe, don't you?
We've got forensic accountants, and they will go and find stuff. They found a boat once, found a plane. It's very cool. You'd be amazed as to what people don't disclose. But business valuations, frequently, if you're in business valuation territory, it will be somebody independent. If you're instructing this firm, then I don't think your spouse would accept a business valuation done by our forensic accountants. So you pick somebody really independent, but we are there to kind of give a view as to whether or not the expense of a valuation is necessary. It's a fascinating area, it really is, business valuations. And of course, not everything is local and straightforward. People own property abroad, people own businesses abroad, family businesses. It is fascinating. Recently, we've had a couple of cases where people are looking to keep a business. They're going to divorce, but they're still going to stay in business together. That kind of throws up a lot of other questions in terms of, is it going to be an equal shareholding? I'm really sorry, that's my dog. Obviously, he heard us talking about dogs earlier.
Away.
Great, sorry about that. Very professional. Businesses, where are we? If you're going to own a business post-divorce, it's rare, but it's possible. But we need to make sure you get some commercial advice to protect yourself. So it is a whole other world, so to speak, really. Okay. Right, we've done emergency fund, interim payments.
There's one about mortgage. If someone was solely paying the mortgage for a year when the other moved out. So I think the main important thing is the mortgage is, I would say on the financial side of it, is the mortgage is paid. I think from experience cases I've seen, it's always going to be noted when one person stopped contributed, and it will be looked at as the whole scenario. But I think, what I know about the financial side of it is just make sure it's paid, and it will be kind of looked at later.
Absolutely. And ultimately, things don't work as black and white as I think sometimes we want them to work. When you're doing a financial settlement, we're looking at the family circumstances overall. And just because you were paying the mortgage for a period of time doesn't mean you get reimbursed pound for pound for that, because it could be a situation where you were paying the mortgage because the other person couldn't. And there's small kids, and kids have to be housed. Very rarely is there complete equality in a marriage when it comes to finances. And as I say, we're looking at achieving a fair outcome. Needs must be met first and foremost. Needs trump everything, and in the majority of cases that means housing needs and keeping a roof over dependent children, making sure their needs are met first and foremost. So sometimes a fair outcome can be achieved, but either one or both parties don't necessarily feel that it's fair, if that makes sense. Okay, righty-ho, where are we? There's lots of chat tonight. That's really lovely. I keep wanting to talk about the dog again. Right. Child maintenance, as I say, child maintenance website. Did you bob that on the chat there, Kate? I'm not sure. There's a link to the child maintenance calculator. Cash withdrawals. You will be. Do you have to explain cash withdrawals? You are most likely going to be asked what the cash is being withdrawn for. Okay. In this situation where you're taking kids on holiday, and the money will be spent by the time you do the financial disclosure, you just need to give a narrative explanation as to what the money was used for. If indeed it is asked about. The questions when you do financial disclosure and then you both ask questions about the other side's finances, they should be proportionate. You can't be asking about 50 quid if you're looking at a couple of million in a case necessarily. That's not necessarily a proportionate way of spending time or legal costs, really, is it? If that sum of money that you're withdrawing each month is a significant sum of money, and crikey, holidays are expensive, and maybe that was what you always did during the marriage anyway, is withdraw cash to put to one side for a family holiday, then that's just explaining the norm. It really will depend perhaps on whether or not the other side accept your explanation. But perhaps one way of looking at it is that you evidence that you couldn't afford the holiday anywhere else in another way, if that makes sense. If you don't have savings, for example, you're taking a couple of £100 out of your paycheck every month. All right. Child maintenance, legal aid, joint bank account. Yes, just be careful about joint bank accounts. You've both got access, and anybody can, either of you can whip out all the contents. University loans, yep, you need to disclose them. They're still a debt, and they're still something that you've got, that you're obligated to pay. So they should be factored into what your own financial circumstances are. Okay. Right, Kate, have I missed anything that you've spotted?
Somebody asked, how long do spousal maintenance payments last for?
Oh, how long's a piece of string? Sometimes it depends. It turns on obviously the financial circumstances of you both and the length of time that someone is going to need them for. Years ago, when I first started in practice, we saw something called a joint lives maintenance order. They're still around. That means maintenance for life, but the courts aren't quite as keen to order them anymore. Normally maintenance is set for a period, so it's called term maintenance. Quite often it can be set for a couple of years. The reason for it being is to give someone to give the financially weaker party time to adjust, if that makes sense. So a couple of years to either finish a course that they've been doing to help increase their income, or improve their own financial circumstances so they can take on a mortgage, for example, or possibly to allow somebody to stay in the family home until the youngest finishes GCSEs. There can be a variety of different reasons as to why spousal maintenance might last for a year, 2 years, 5 years. It's on a case-by-case basis in terms of everybody's family circumstances. But you can, if there's a risk that you are the person, when you're the person paying maintenance and you have a court order saying that there's going to be spousal maintenance for a period of 2 years following the divorce, if you think there's a risk that the person who's in receipt of the maintenance isn't going to be doing their side of the bargain, they're not going to be changing their circumstances to help themselves regarding finances, they can apply to court to extend spousal maintenance. That's just something you need to be very aware of. I appreciate, and if there's any lawyers listening, you will know I'm dealing with this on a very broad brush basis to kind of make just some points. I'm not going into it in too much detail, but there is something called the Section 28(1)(a) bar for anybody out there who's paying spousal maintenance and wants to make sure that it doesn't continue after the end of the term. That means that spousal maintenance cannot continue past that, the term that's been specified by the court. Spousal maintenance can also be awarded on what's called a nominal basis, which is a few pence every year, just literally to keep someone's income claims open. It can sometimes function as what we call a safety net, for example, if there's young children and something happens to one of the kids, or perhaps the mum, which means that mum can't work anymore. It means the door is still open to apply to court if needed, I stress if needed, to help with that kind of situation for financial support at a later date. Is it used? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But as I say, it's a safety net, safety provision when we're not sure definitely how quickly someone can stand on their own 2 feet, or rather to help them out if something unforeseen happens. Okay. All right. Can anything be done about taking money out of joint accounts and spent singularly? Yeah, and as Jodie highlighted, there's a question mark here as to how soon you should be moving from a joint accounts system to having money in your own accounts. If, for example, you're in a situation where both parties' wages are going into one joint account and the other party is spending all the money every month, then we need to and so bills aren't being paid, then we need to get that sorted. It may well be that you work out who's taking over what outgoings, and we stop putting that money into the joint accounts. If there's a difference between what's normal behavior for family spending and what's happened as a result of the divorce, if that makes sense. Okay. There will always be a paper trail to find these things. I've lost the question again. Flitting between chat and questions. Sorry about this, Kate. It's not very slick tonight. Right. Okay. Eek. Okay. So there's been money put into a joint account. It's quite a lot of money, £10,000, and somebody's transferred it into their own private account and now spent it. That's a nasty situation. That really does make you feel sick to the bottom of your stomach, doesn't it? Right. Well, it's going to depend on where that money came from to start with. If it's matrimonial, then we would like that to be treated that your spouse has had his share already. Does that make sense? There are ways and means of dealing with that. Okay, cool. It's not to be disregarded just because they took it out of the joint account and spent it. Admittedly, it's a pain, but it can be solved. We just need to know more details. But yes, we, on the face of it, treat him as already having had the benefit of that money. Okay. Right,
there's one just come to me here just saying, is it ever too early to seek financial advice throughout the divorce process? But what I'd say is the earlier you can, the better position you'll be in, really. I quite often see my clients from the very beginning to the end, and it's quite nice to have that kind of rapport and you completely understand the situation together. At the beginning, it might be things like putting a budget plan together and understanding the assets. And then when you do have the proposals, you can work together and see actually, does that work long term? And then at the end, when you do have the financial separation there, being able to plan, your new life then. So yeah, I'd say there's never really It can't really be too early, really.
Yeah, and it's somebody in your corner. You know, it goes back to this point about feeling in control, feeling empowered, feeling like you know what's going on. Sometimes it's that taking that first step, isn't it, to get yourself familiarized with your finances and working out what there actually is there. As I say, in England and Wales, the process is that we end your financial relationship on an eyes wide open basis. And financial disclosure is a really good principle that we have in an attempt to try and get the fairest outcome we possibly can. It can be quite difficult. You know, you're feeling very different at the end of a marriage. It's very easy for me to sit here and Jodie sit here confident and saying you should do this, should do that, when actually you're still just trying to function sometimes, or you don't know what questions to be asking. But hopefully approaching things methodically, if you feel you can, and getting help with those people around you, your local IFA or someone like Jodie, will help you get to grips with everything.
I think it's so, me and Kate were saying earlier, it's when you're heading into a divorce, everything you've got to do seems so overwhelming. So I think literally just almost writing a list and just taking it like little step at a time is the best way to kind of, I think, emotionally deal with it, because no one's ever going to be able to do everything at once. So I think just tiny little bite-sized pieces along the way, and then suddenly you'll look back and be like, wow, how did I get this far?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, it wasn't until I got divorced myself that I realized actually how paralyzing it can be. And I must admit, I'm much more, much gentler and much more patient with my clients now when we're dealing with financial disclosure, because I know how crippling it can be, how difficult it is to find that even the time in the day sometimes to pull the information together, let alone think about it. So there we go. Right, where are we? We're pretty much 6:30, aren't we? So now Kate set me straight in that the next session for Stowe Talks is in September. We're getting August off, and it's going to be, as I said earlier, on I think it's the importance of emotional support during the divorce process. So I think it's Wednesday the 25th of September. I hope I haven't got that wrong again, otherwise I will be completely blacklisted and not asked to do this again. But I think that's right. Let me just double check. Yep, 25th of September. Fabulous. Right, as I say, let us have your feedback. Massive thanks to Jodie. Her details are on the slides that you've seen. Kate's going to be doing a follow-up email, I believe, with the details on there. And obviously we're here for anything that you might need as well. And we'll see you the other side of the summer holidays. Enjoy, keep calm, and try and be
Fingers
organised.
crossed, nice weather for us all.
No, I know. In our little blue and white shirts. Right. You take care, Jodie. Lovely to see you.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.
Bye.